What's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Shepherd, as always, with the Ben Shepherd Podcast Network. Welcome back to another episode of Everything Collegiate. We're coming to you a little later than I anticipated. It's already Wednesday. We're already getting close to week 1. We already had week 0. We already had fights, not on the field, of course, between a quarterback's father and a quarterback's older brother. We had Farmageddon, we had Ireland, and we have an absolutely stacked week 1 with 3 top 10 matchups. 6 of the top 10 teams in the country, according to the AP poll, are facing other top 10 teams. It doesn't get any better than this. Well, it will later in the year, but I can't think of a week 1 I've been looking forward to more so than this. Before we get to week 1, let's dive backwards and really quickly talk about the big game from week 0, Farmageddon, in the home of farms, Ireland. Iowa State, Kansas State, where the Cyclones took down K-State 24-21 in a rain-soaked, turnover-filled slugfest. Rocco Becht and the Iowa State Cyclones came away victorious over their Big 12 rivals. By the way, the Cyclones have now beaten Kansas State 3 years in a row, 5 in the last 6. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty darn impressive. Neither team could do anything. Neither team could do anything in this game, but at the end of the day, Rocco Becht and his 183-yard, 3-touchdown performance was enough to get the Cyclones into Big 12 pole position. That's what this game was all about. I said before the game, it is a Big 12 title game eliminator. I'm going to rescind that a little bit because I still know nothing about either one of these teams. I don't. I know nothing. The first 3 quarters of that game were played in an absolute quagmire. Neither offense could do anything. Dylan Edwards was injured on the opening punt or even opening kick. He was injured right away. Because of the weather, neither team was represented accurately in that game in Ireland. Iowa State will be better than 21% on third downs. They will be. That won't be the case ever again this season. Jace Brown will not have 3 drops for Kansas State in a game like he did. But I do think there are some things that did prove, and I think will prove, to be accurate as we go long term. Iowa State's interior run defense is very solid, but they do have an extremely limited pass rush. Their DNs could do nothing. Their D tackles were very solid against the run, stuffing anything Kansas State wanted to do with Joe Jackson. The Iowa State secondary was poor, covering anything deep and outside. Right? The Kansas State receivers, once they got deep outside, they had a field day. But over the middle, they were very solid, just like we knew going in. Avery Johnson, the Kansas State quarterback, is still a dynamic playmaker, but he does still make too many bad decisions. That has to be worked out quickly. Otherwise, K-State, remember, this is the guy that pushed Will Howard out of Kansas State to go on and win a national title at Ohio State. It was this kid. This kid's talent pushed Will Howard to Ohio State. He was going to stay. Except for Avery Johnson, and Avery Johnson has to become better at decision-making. And Rocco Becht is the exact opposite of Avery Johnson. He's not flashy. He is the antithesis of flash. But he doesn't make mistakes. And that won the game. Iowa State has a very talented and deep backfield and no talent at wide receiver. I think that will hold true for the season. Of the 45 points scored in that game, though, 24 of them were in the fourth quarter without all the weather issues. So I tend to think these teams will both be better offensively as the season goes. But again, it's a really big win for Iowa State, and it's a massive loss for Kansas State. You can't blame weather for their loss because both teams played in the exact same conditions. they were the worst team on the day. They had to work their backside off to make the game close. They couldn't do anything for a large portion of that game offensively. And they were supposed to be the team with the better offense going into the game. And they weren't. One other name that I want to highlight from week 0. It's nothing to do, I love Kansai Matsusama, the Japanese kicker for Hawaii who learned how to kick field goals on YouTube and just beat Stanford, who were going to go 0-12, by the way, this year. But I want you to remember the name Maverick McIver. Maverick McIver is the starting quarterback at Western Kentucky, and this kid is nasty. He will be drafted in the NFL draft whenever he decides to go. Over 400 yards against a solid Sam Houston State team. Was really good, and this Conference USA could belong to the Hilltoppers this year. I just want to give him a shout-out because he was the best football player in week 0. Maverick McIver. But now we got to talk about week 1. That's what's coming up. That's what you care about. That's what's about to happen. We have 3 top 10 matchups. I'm going to break all of them down in detail. And then I'm going to jump around a couple other games from week 1 I think you aren't paying enough attention to and should spend part of your weekend focusing on. But we have to start in the shoe in Columbus, where the number 1 ranked Texas Longhorns will be traveling to face the 3rd ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Yes, it is annoying that this mega matchup is a noon kickoff. Thank you, Fox. Thank you for being so afraid of the SEC-ABC marriage in the primetime slot that you force us to watch this game at noon. This game would be one of the all-time greats if it was under the lights. It won't be, but it will be an instant classic. That one issue aside, there's no better way to kick off a football season than Ohio State, defending national champions, against Texas in a rematch of a college football playoff semifinal. They just had, Texas hasn't played another team since they lost to Ohio State back in January. They're playing them back-to-back. It's kind of funny how that works. These are 2 very similar and yet vastly different teams. I understand what you're confused. Allow me to elaborate on that oxymoron that I just created. Ohio State is still the football program with the most talented offensive and the most talented defensive players in the country. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. They have the best offensive player in the country, and they have the best defensive player in the country. I don't even think there's an argument. Caleb Downs would be the number 1 pick in this year's draft if he wasn't a safety, and Jeremiah Smith would have been the number 1 pick in last year's draft if he was eligible, just like he'd be the number 1 pick in this year's draft if he was eligible. He isn't. He's still not 20. It's crazy. But as the defending national champions, right, we always talk about in the NFL, there's a Super Bowl tax. There's a national championship tax. They've had to replace a metric ton of talent on both sides of the ball. Similarly, Texas this season probably has the most depth and the most overall talent in the country, just like Ohio State did last year. Both teams, right, have highly touted but mostly unproven quarterbacks starting for them this year. Texas, we all know about Arch Manning. Before we get carried away, calling him Peyton Manning with Eli's athleticism, or Peyton Manning with Archie's athleticism, if we're being more honest, he has never started a game against any defense or team anywhere close to the caliber of this Ohio State Buckeye team. So we still need to see if he can do it. We do not know. We think we know, but we don't know. What's the famous Jim Mora quote? You think you know, but you really don't know. I don't know if Arch Manning's going to be any good. We'll find out on Saturday how far away he is from that. I don't think if he plays badly, it's the end of the book. No, it's just the start of a new chapter. If he plays well, Yeah, the book might be written. Like, if he could come out of the season and play well in the horseshoe, the book might be written already. Ohio State, meanwhile, have an even less proven commodity at quarterback, with redshirt freshman Julian Slayer-Sayen at quarterback. A 6'1 youngster had to win a tough battle with Lincoln Kienholz. Reports coming out of Columbus are that Sayen holds the edge in terms of being a pro-style passer, but he's nowhere near the athlete of Kienholz. Showcasing, it's going to be a dramatic shift, right? Will Howard was much more of an athlete, less of a pro-style passer, and Sayen is probably going to be the guy unless things don't work out, which it might not. It's exactly the opposite decision they made when they made the choice of Dwayne Haskins over Joe Burrow. Now, Dwayne Haskins was fine for Ohio State as a starting quarterback, but he was no Joe Burrow. Both of these teams have potentially elite defenses, but Texas probably has the edge as a whole defense right now because so much of Ohio State's defensive talent got drafted in April. But, of course, Caleb Downs, again, is the best defender in football. Period. That's it. On the flip side of that, I'd argue that Texas's offensive line is far less proven or seasoned than Ohio State's is. The Texas Longhorn O-linemen have only 45 starts combined amongst all of them. Not just the 5 likely starters. Everybody in that O-line room. There's only 45 total combined starts. That's a very low number. Compare that to Ohio State's, which is 85, which is much more similar to teams like Miami or Notre Dame or Penn State, teams that have very good offensive lines on paper. It's much more normal for a national title contender, especially one that sends guys to the drafts every year, like both these teams do. But now a little bit more about this game specifically. Honestly, despite the road atmosphere in the horseshoe, I think Texas gets the job done. I don't know about this one. As of right now, the Buckeyes are 1.5 favorites. But teams like Michigan have proven that inferior teams can win in that environment if they play good enough defense. Texas is not inferior to Ohio State. They are probably equivalent. The cornerback duo of Jalen Gilbo and Malik Muhammad are as good as any in the land for the Longhorns. They performed very well against Ohio State's dangerous receivers in last year's college football semifinal. All ride Longhorns in a close one. Texas wins 31-27 to put a firm stamp on their early season that they're in it for the long haul. Let's go to the Saturday night game. The Saturday night's main event, the Battle for Death Valley. The Battle of Death Valleys. The Battle of Tigers. The 9th-ranked LSU Tigers and the 4th-ranked Clemson Tigers at Clemson's Memorial Stadium, otherwise known as Death Valley. This is a battle very different to the matinee that is Ohio State and Texas, okay? Clemson and LSU are very experienced teams trying to take that next step instead of younger, more unproven teams at that next step looking to fulfill potential. For LSU, it's playoffs or bust. National title or bust. For Clemson, it's national title or bust. They've already been a playoff team with this roster. Both of these teams are chock full of experienced future NFL talent on both sides of the ball. And again, like in the matinee, these two teams kind of mirror each other a little bit. LSU's Garrett Nussmeier and Clemson's Cade Klubnik are probably both going to be first-round NFL picks in April, unless they regress horribly, a la Carson Beck. Both teams are absolutely loaded at wide receiver. LSU boasts the transfer additions of Nick Anderson from Oklahoma and Barry Brown from Kentucky, while Clemson has its young superstar trio of TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco Jr., Antonio Williams. Like, all those guys are going to be NFL players within 2 years. Then there are the defenses. Less I say, these defenses are nasty. The biggest addition for Clemson is not on the field, it's on the sidelines. Dabo Swinney brought in Penn State D coordinator Tom Allen to fill the same role in his program. And he's got guys like Peter Woods at D tackle, Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown being absolute tackling magnets in the middle of the field. This team is loaded with NFL Pro Bowlers, potentially. LSU has a new D coordinator and former Missouri D coordinator Blake Baker. Baker has tackle machine Whit Weeks in the middle of the field. Lockdown Vatek transfer, Mansour Delaney. Florida State's star edge rusher transferred in Patrick Payton. LSU and head coach Brian Kelly invested heavily into the portal this season, going for broke to compete for and potentially win a national title. And don't get it twisted, they're good enough to do it, but they have to do it. You can't be Brian Kelly and watch your successor take Notre Dame to a national title game before you took the team that you left Notre Dame to coach at, saying you needed to be in the SEC to win. Notre Dame didn't have the resources. It looks like they do. It looks like you might have been the issue. He can't sit by while Notre Dame continues to be dominant under Marcus Freeman, as we'll get to in a second, and LSU's floundering. Then he just becomes a new Jimbo Fisher, a nobody who can't win anywhere. I'm sticking with Clemson, though, to win this one. Clemson is my pick to win the national title, and I'm sticking with him through thick and thin this year until I am proven otherwise on the field. I think Dabo Swinney has the best team in the country. Period. I think they'll win the national title, the whole 9 yards, baby. Give me Clemson at home in another tight one, but Dabo's a better coach than Brian Kelly, and he gets his brand of Tigers over the line, 38-31, Clemson in a big win for the ACC, and that probably makes them 13-0, for being honest, because this is, I think, the only team Clemson has a chance of losing to, but I digress. Our Sunday night game. Sunday night. No NFL this week. College football's got every day of the weekend, Thursday through Monday, and I could not be happier. The 6th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish travel to the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens to take on the Hurricanes, baby. It is a renewal of an old-time Catholics versus convicts rivalry. Doggy, this is going to be fun. One of the greatest rivalries of the 1980s, featuring a player that played in it. Former O-lineman Mario Cristobal played under both Jimmy Johnson and Dennis Erickson in this rivalry. Now he's coaching in this rivalry, the first time these teams have met since, I think, 2017, where Miami smoked Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. You got to think about this for a second. At one point last year, Miami was 9-0. and ranked 4th in the country. They lost 2 road games to a pair of solid but beneath them teams and missed the playoffs. In a year where the ACC got 2 bids, which will not happen every year, you would imagine. Miami didn't get one of them. Miami didn't get one. The ACC got 2 bids. Clemson and SMU. Now, I don't think it was their fault that they didn't have any quality wins. Was it Miami's fault that Florida and Florida State decided to prolapse for an entire year? No, it's not. But now it's 2025, and Miami is leaving nothing to chance by scheduling the defending national championship losers on opening weekend. Now, granted, at home, but being that Notre Dame's an ad hoc ACC team in terms of scheduling, it works out, and it can renew a rivalry. But this is a slightly different Notre Dame team under Marcus Freeman that went to a national title game against Ohio State back in January. C.J. Carr is the new quarterback. he's been given the keys to what might be the most explosive offense in the United States. Running back tandem, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are back, but quarterback Riley Leonard isn't. I almost forgot how much of an impact Riley Leonard made on the ground. He scored 17 times on the ground last year and ran for over 1,000 yards. Carr's not going to do either of those things. He might develop into a better passer than Riley Leonard. I wouldn't put that past him. I think that's quite attainable. But only time will tell that. Notre Dame defense, once again, very solid. And the secondary might edge towards elitism this season. But honestly, I don't find the Fighting Irish as interesting as the Canes earlier this year. I don't think there are any losses on Notre Dame's schedule outside of potentially this one, potentially A&M, and potentially USC, but those each get flimsier as you go. The Canes, though, have former Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. Carson Beck, in 8 months, has gotten injured, healed, transferred to Miami, cheated on and been dumped by his basketball-playing girlfriend, shout out Cavendish sisters, and had his new Lamborghini stolen, all before taking a snap at Hard Rock Stadium. If that isn't quintessential Miami, I do not know what is, nor will I wish to find out what it is. I don't want the allures taken from me. This is the most Miami thing to ever happen to this program in 20 years. On maybe the kneel down not happening and fumbling for a touch. Maybe that. Every wide receiver to this program's new. Damian Martinez is gone. One thing this team does have for it is potentially the best offensive line in the country. Veteran staples like Francis Mauigoa, Inez Cooper are joined by TCU's transfer center, James Brockermeyer. Brockermeyer. That is a lengthy last name. The offense won't be as productive as last year. Carson Beck's not as good as Cam Ward. Even if he rehabs his reputation enough to get drafted this year, Cam Ward was a Heisman finalist and the number 1 overall pick. Carson Beck is not that. But the defense surely won't be as bad as it was last year. New D coordinator Corey Heatherman was successful at Minnesota, successful at James Madison as D coordinator before making this move. And if his guys stay healthy this year, they might have a solid bunch of defenders. Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor are legit all ACC DNs if they stay healthy. Jacksonville State transfer Zechariah Pozier is a sure tackling safety that will address this team's weakest aspect. Secondary tackling crippled them last year. But with all this defensive potential, the key word is potential. I haven't seen it with these two brown eyes yet. All right? I have not seen it. The Hurricanes got butchered by the running attacks of Georgia Tech and Syracuse at the end of last season. Neither of those teams run the ball as well as Notre Dame will be on Sunday night. I'm going with the Irish here, and it might not be super close. I don't think it's a washout, but it's not going to be super close. I'm going to go Notre Dame beating Miami 42-28. Nice, solid little double-digit 2-touchdown win. Really quick before we get out of here today, some other games to watch this weekend. We're going to go chronologically, how you could watch them. Thursday night, the 25th ranked Boise State Broncos head down to Tampa in Raymond James Stadium to take on the USF Bulls. Boise State should win this one with Maddox Madsen, who we've already talked about. But USF and quarterback Byron Brown is not a team to be overlooked anymore. Head coach Alex Galesh has stabilized this program, and they are legit contenders in the American Conference, which I think could steal the Group of 5 bid from the Mountain West this year. The other Thursday night game, Nebraska taking on Cincinnati. Patrick Mahomes cosplay specialist Dylan Raiola is going to play in Arrowhead Stadium. The jokes write themselves if you know anything or have seen anything or anything about this kid. All right? Matt Rule might finally have a better-than-decent team in Nebraska, and with Cal transfer and Isaiah Hunter, Raiola might now have the weapons. This is it. This is the make or break year for Nebraska under Matt Rule, I think. I know he's a hell of a recruiter, but you got to win on the field, and it's got to start by taking care of a Cincinnati team that they are better than. Moving on to Friday. The Friday night game has two great games. Auburn and Baylor. Hey, Vegas, you're normally not wrong. How is Auburn favored by 2.5 points on the road at Baylor? How does that make sense? Auburn hasn't announced a starting quarterback, and they have 3 different play callers on their team, in their coaching staff. 3 different guys are going to be calling plays. One's calling third downs, one's calling first and second, but they can all be overruled by the head coach. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I think Baylor is the best team nobody's talking about. I've said it from day one. They're my pick to win the Big 12. I think they're a really good team. Auburn is always solid, and sophomore wide receiver Cam Coleman is a bona fide stud, but Baylor might mop this team and start to make a little noise nationally. The other game on Friday, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets travel up to Boulder to face the Travis Hunter-less Colorado Buffaloes. Coach Prime has a very different team up in Boulder this year. I think they'll still draw eyeballs with Liberty transfer Caden Salter starting week 1. That was announced a couple days ago. Oh, and it's not just Caden Salter, who was one of the best quarterbacks on the transfer market this year. It's a Georgia Tech team with almost every piece back from a team that took Georgia to 8 overtimes last year. Need we forget as well, they started the whole Florida State slide into joy for all of us non-Florida State fans. That game is going to be full of fireworks, and I cannot wait for it. Saturday, there's a couple solid ones. You got to remember, week 1 is mostly teams playing FCS schools. That's mostly what week 1 is. We got a couple marquee matchups. We got a couple solid games, but there doesn't have the depth that most weeks will have in terms of college football. Syracuse facing the 24th-ranked Tennessee Volunteers in the Georgia Dome. Not one person's going to watch this game. It's on head-to-head with Texas Ohio State. These poor guys, they're out of luck. Nobody's watching their game. I think Tennessee's the most overrated team by all the preseason polls, and if a depleted Syracuse team even hangs around in this one, that confirms my sentiment. 8th-ranked Alabama is traveling down to Tallahassee to take on the aforementioned Florida State Seminoles. New quarterback Thomas Castellanos has been talking a lot of smack for a guy that got benched at Boston College last year. Florida State will be better than they were last year by virtue of law. Like, they can't be as bad as they were last year. But can they shock the world against a new quarterback in Ty Simpson? Maybe. I think this game will be closer than a lot of people are anticipating, but I don't think the Seminoles have quite enough to pull off the upset. The last one on Saturday, the Utah Utes travel to Pasadena and the Rose Bowl to take on the UCLA Bruins. If it rolls around at 11 p.m. Saturday night and you got nothing to do, turn on Fox. Not Fox News. Who wants to? No, don't do that to yourself on a weekend, of course. But turn on OG Fox. Nico Iamaleva's debut for the Bruins against a Utah team that very much could be back. You don't want to jump the gun, but Utah could be back. New Mexico transfer Devin Dampier is an extremely fun QB to watch, and head coach Kyle Whittingham is going to have the Utes ready to go in what most likely will be his final season at the helm of Utah in a legendary Hall of Fame career. That game, if you're still up, which I might be, I'm going to try. I might not be, but I'm going to try. That game is must watch. The Sunday game that is the matinee for the Notre Dame-Miami game. The Virginia Tech Hokies travel to the Georgia Dome to take on the 13th-ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. Really simple. Is South Carolina a playoff contender again? Maybe. Is Lenora Sellers a legit Heisman Trophy contender? This game will be an early barometer. They will beat Virginia Tech. If they don't, no. But they will. How much will determine how much I believe in the Gamecocks or Sellers this year. And finally, Monday night, the TCU Horned Frogs travel to Chapel Hill to take on the North Kakalaki Tar Heels. I only have one thing to say in this, and I do not need to say any more. Bill Belichick in college football. That's going to do it for me here on Everything Collegiate. We'll be back next Tuesday to break down every one of these games and anything else that catches my eye over the weekend. I'm going to be watching so much college football, I won't know what to do with myself. And I hope you will too, and I hope you'll join me on the backside of this great weekend of college athletics. See you on the far side.